Welcome to Distracted, the podcast with Angela Lockwood, the place where you will find practical brain-boosting strategies, expert insights, and real-life stories to help busy brains thrive in the age of distraction. Let's go. Welcome to the latest episode of Distracted. I'm Angela Lockwood, and today's episode is very much a professional and a personal alignment for me. I will unpack this further throughout my conversation, but today I'm really honoured to be joined by Olivia Nassaris, who is the new Chief Executive Officer of Parkinson's Australia. So first of all, Olivia, welcome to Distracted.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Olivia and I were just speaking off air, and Olivia has such an amazing background, which I'm going to get her to explain to you. But just a little bit of story around why I've invited Olivia onto Distracted is Parkinson's, which a lot of people hear about but have very little knowledge about what it actually is. It's a neurological condition, and I'm sure Olivia will unpack this much better than what I will. But it's often a condition or a disease that people hear about but often can be confused by the presentation of. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a story around what this is. I have a neighbour who has Parkinson's, and he was telling me he went to a restaurant and had spoken about the food wasn't delivered as sort of he had wanted, wasn't being particularly aggressive or anything. He was just being quite assertive. But he has what we classically know and often pair with Parkinson's as having a tremor in his hand. He spoke a little bit shakily in his voice. And unfortunately, the waiter misinterpreted his presentation with being drunk. And so what happened was, and what ensued after this, is this really awful confrontation about the waiter saying, "How dare you come in here drunk and question our cooking?" Now, Olivia, I'm sure me saying this story to you, it's probably, you've heard so many like it, and it gives me goosebumps even sharing it. But for him, his experience was that he has Parkinson's, and these are some of the symptoms that he displays as a part of his condition. And I guess raising awareness through conversations like this is really important to me, because I also have an auntie who has Parkinson's, and I also have my beautiful mum who is in the middle and declining quite rapidly through Parkinson's. And so I have a best friend whose mum has Parkinson's, had Parkinson's, I should say. And all of these things, I'm seeing so much Parkinson's popping up, Olivia, around me in my life, but also in my professional life. Is there an increase in this condition? Why is it an increase in the condition? And how can we... There's so many questions I have for you. Let's start there.
I'll start with the incidence and prevalence. So we've just released a report called The Ecosystem of Parkinson's that people can find on our webpage. And it was conducted by Professor George Mellick from the Griffith University. And this is the latest data in Australia on prevalence and incidence. And yes, it is rising. By 2050, it's set to triple. So there's currently, of what we know, so we're talking diagnosed people, over 150,000 people in in Australia. And then if you think about 2050, that's set to triple, which is just incredible. Now, why is it still increasing? Because we don't know the cause and we don't know the cure. So you think about, a timeline, and you've got the start, which is causation, and you've got the finish, which is cure, and we don't know the answer to either of those questions. So until we do, prevalence and incidence is just going to keep rising.
And it really amazes me even hearing you say that in a world where we are so technologically advanced, that our medical system is advancing so rapidly, that for a condition that is so prevalent, how in the world can we not know where it's coming from? And I know this is, of lots of different conditions, but can we not even know where it's coming from or how to cure it? It always baffles me.
Even crazier than that is that there is not like a clear diagnostic tool for Parkinson's. So it's a clinical diagnosis. So there's not a scan or a blood test or, anything like that. So when you think about, people walking around undiagnosed for Parkinson's, it'll be a long time until they actually seek help and support and medical advice. But let's say diabetes, you can sit in a shopping centre and prick people on the finger and work out whether or not they have diabetes and start to save their lives, start to improve their well-being, start medications, all that kind of stuff. So we're lacking in so many areas in Parkinson's. And there's so many different areas. And especially, we've got the causation, we've got the cure, but you've got the middle bit as well, which is symptom management, reversing symptoms, slowing symptoms down, stopping symptoms. We've got so much to do.
There is so much to do, and I guess that middle bit is what I'm experiencing at the moment, is seeing the effects not just on the people with Parkinson's but on carers and families and the medical system and the community. So it's so widespread, and I just want to pause for a minute. I'm going to the Parkinson's Australia site here, where they have amazing resources. It's really beautifully, clearly laid out for anybody who's listening to this that wants to learn more. But there's one specific page on there that really sparked my attention, Olivia, and that was the statistics page. And I'm going to read out a couple of these. I'm looking straight at the site now. That Parkinson's is the fastest growing neurological condition in the world, with 10 million people currently affected. Young onset Parkinson's, which we'll get to. I know that a lot of people think that neurological conditions are often an older person's condition, but what we can see on here, up to 10 to 20% of all people living with Parkinson's are actually diagnosed in their 20s to 50s. Now, I'm inching a lot closer to 50, and that really startles me. And then we've got so many other great statistics on there in terms of knowledge, but they're not great statistics in what they're presenting to us. So, Olivia, just if we can go back to you, I want to know what made you move into the world of Parkinson's. What's your backstory? Because we all seem to have a story when we're linked into this world.
Yeah, we do. So I've always worked in a sector that's just made up in my mind called the social justice sector, the side of what I used to call it. And, I worked for trade unions like the Tertiary Education Union and the Nurses Union. I went overseas to Brazil and ran an international volunteer organisation that worked in the communities, so in the favelas, so what's more commonly known as the urban slums, so domestic violence projects, teaching kids English, sports projects, and namely focused at children to try to keep them out of drugs and gangs, which is rife over there, and pathways that children take unless there's other things to do. And then I came back to Australia and had my baby here. Well, he's not a baby anymore. He's 11, so he doesn't like to can't call him baby anymore. But when I was returning to work, I saw a position come up at Parkinson South Australia. And I was my yaya, so my grandmother's end-of-life carer when she had Parkinson's. And I just thought that it was a job that was in the social justice sector, like I always wanted and like I had always done. And it was communications and campaigns, which is what I used to specialise in when I worked in the trade union movement. And so it just, it was a bit serendipitous. And funnily enough, when the people that hired me, so the board members and the staff at the time that hired me, had the same feeling that I did. So which was when I walked into the room, they knew it was my job. And when I walked into the room, I knew that, it was my job as well. And maybe it did come from having that experience with my yaya. Look, it was a different world of Parkinson's back then. We literally knew nothing. And when I look back to what we used to do, we used to keep a certain amount of photos that I would go through with her on a regular basis just to, check what she was and who she was remembering. We used to keep a little diary of conversations that we had when we called other family members interstate. And, when I look back now, they were just little things that we made up. But, you would call them as an occupational therapist, neuroplasticity exercises kind of thing, but we had no idea what we were doing. I think in terms of how I feel about working for the community, it feels like I'm doing her memory, a service, and I feel that not lots of people get to jump out of bed every morning and be really excited and motivated about what they do. But, I can. So in 2017, I was appointed CEO of Parkinson's Australia. We merged in NT and ACT into those groups as well. And I think it was 2018, I founded a social enterprise in South Australia called Brain and Body Fitness Studio, which is based on neuroplasticity, which is something that your viewers and listeners would know about. And it started because of a piece of research work that I read from Dr. Jay Alberts, which is I think a New York neurologist and researcher. And he was on a tandem bike with a friend of his with Parkinson's, and he was on the front and she was on the back. And he was doing all of the work, but he noticed that when they would get off rides, that her tremor would actually improve and her symptoms would improve. And so then thus started his research into force rate cycling, which piqued my interest into evidence-based exercise protocols to improve Parkinson's. But since Brain and Body Fitness Studio actually services, MS, MND, heart disease, diabetes, all these different clients with all these different conditions, because it's pretty unique in its offerings. Supervised by exercise physiologists, they get a prescription, an exercise prescription from an exercise physiologist. They have a really extensive assessment, and it just from a piece of research that I read just piqued my interest.
And that's, I guess, the thing that's a positive that's coming forth now. The more that we know, the more we can do research, the more information we get. And I think for people who are listening who actually have maybe are not familiar with Parkinson's, one of the images I love that you share through your Parkinson's Australia website is the image of the I was about to say the icicle. It's so not an iceberg. The iceberg. It's like an icicle's one part of it, the iceberg. And I think that's a really great image. And actually, we will share that when we link anything in the show notes. But it actually shows the Parkinson's iceberg of being what we see above the water and then what we don't below the water. And I just want to read a couple of those things out. The things that we often see are things like rigidity, tremor, bradykinesia, which is a lot of sort of adverse movements, and postural disturbance. Now, that's the stuff that we see as a community, and sometimes they can be mistaken, like my story that I shared with you, as people maybe being affected by drugs or alcohol, or people just, for lots of different things. But the things that people don't see are things like speech difficulties, swallowing difficulties, lack of facial expression, loss of smell, pain. We see depression as a really strong factor of this as well. And one of the things that I find actually really disturbing, and I will use it as that phrase, is the hallucinations and the onset of the changes of someone's cognition as well when they're in Parkinson's. What I would, I think for people who are wanting to know about what we're talking about, what's that experience, you share so many great resources, as I mentioned, in videos. And one of the most recent campaigns that I've seen that you're running is with Alan Border, the cricket legend. I didn't know he had Parkinson's, and that really shed a light for me on going, wow, we don't really ever know the full picture, do we? So how did that relationship come about with Alan Border, and why is it so important to have somebody like him promoting the real, I guess the stuff below the water of the iceberg? Why is it important to have somebody of his presence involved?
So AB was diagnosed in 2016, and he kind of recently was public about his diagnosis, but he's been very clear that he wants to be private about it as well, which is funny for a video that has gone out through thousands of. But he was when we talked, he was very serious about the fact that he doesn't want to be the poster boy for living with Parkinson's. He doesn't want his identity to be all about that. But what he did want was to create systemic change so that everyone in the Australian Parkinson's community could experience, positive change. And that is by supporting our pre-budget submission to the federal government. And so that's why the video was a shout out to the Prime Minister and the Health Minister, because it wasn't just about him coming on camera and saying, I have Parkinson's and feel sorry for me or anything. It was about a call to the federal government to do more.
Yeah, and the statistics are showing that there's a necessity to do more. And I do. I'm going to go a little bit. I want to know some things personally as well here. So if you could indulge me a little bit, Olivia, too, for people that are listening who might be carers, family members of people living with Parkinson's, what are some of the main challenges that you see people coming to Parkinson's Australia with and for? What are people asking for and calling for?
Yeah. Let's take a step back and talk about what we know about Parkinson's, which is by the time that someone presents with enough symptoms to kind of warrant, seeking out some medical help, they've most likely lost 80% of dopamine. And dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters in your brain, as you know, which but people think that dopamine is only responsible for movement. But it's not. It's responsible for learning and education and reward. And motivation and reward, so the reason we do something and then the feel-good feeling that we get after doing it is the reason that we get up in the morning. It's the reason that, we put effort into baking a cake for someone, because even though it requires a lot of effort and messy kitchen and all of that kind of stuff, the reward is their face being lit up, when you take it into the room. It's dragging yourself out of bed to do a gym session that you don't want to do on a Sunday, but then after you're like, I nailed that, I'm going to go get myself a coffee because So all of that is dopamine. So if you think about that, number one, you've been diagnosed with a condition where one of your feel-good neurotransmitters is depleted, right? Which will affect your movement, okay? And then number two, so you've got disease-related depression because you've been told that you have an incurable degenerative disease, right? Number two, you've got depression because it actually takes away one of your feel-good neurotransmitters. Number three, anxiety is exacerbated in Parkinson's. And so people that have never experienced depression and anxiety can get late onset depression and anxiety when they've been diagnosed. So you've got the anxiety of having the condition and you've got the anxiety of not having the neurotransmitter to help you with that anxiety. And then you've got apathy on top of that. And so all the things that you could be doing to improve, your symptoms and your daily well-being, it takes motivation to do that. So what do people want and what do people need? They need a wraparound system of multidisciplinary support and advice and information and ways to overcome that apathy, to do the things that they know are going to help, but to actually get there and do it. So, and that might be through lots of different ways. So let's say, I have Parkinson's and you're going to be my walking buddy. Do you have the time and the motivation to make sure that, you're rocking up at my door and stuff, coffee in hand, saying, come on, let's go, let's do this? Or, is it if I'm on NDIS, is it a paid, exercise physiologist that's making sure that I'm strengthening my core so I can reduce my, falls risks, or making sure that, as a I know young people with young onset Parkinson's who want to be doing things like coaching their kids' soccer teams and stuff. So making sure they're doing stuff so that then they can be contributing into society in different ways as well. So you see how it's the depression and the apathy and the anxiety that usually affects people's well-being. I'm not going to say more than the motor symptoms, because the motor symptoms are actually quite, I don't think people realise, quite painful. We have a lot of anecdotal data from people who are in pain all the time. Then you add things like lack of sleep, So poor sleep hygiene, onto all of that. And, you know, it's a disaster. Everyone knows that after a bad night's sleep or two, you feel really crap. Can you imagine having that every single night and then still trying to have the motivation to then improve your situation and improve your well-being by doing all of these extra things? It's a really complicated, you know, condition to manage, and to manage well. And so you need help and support. And for example, I have a client in Mackay, Queensland. I say a client, it's actually a friend's brother, my friend's mum's brother. I'm trying to find an OT in a regional town, and that ain't happening, I can tell you. And not only that, they don't live in Mackay, so he would be able to go to Mackay to have an assessment done, but they need a home assessment done as well. So that, you know, I'm trying to find an OT that will then travel an hour and a half to where they actually live. So, you know, we've got this huge disparity between how people live well with Parkinson's depending on where they live. And in Australia, you know, regional, rural and remote communities really, you know, don't have those kind of allied health services that someone living with Parkinson's and carers really need, because a carer can't do all of that.
No, and Olivia, it's interesting. We just went through the process ourselves around some assessments, and I'm an occupational therapist. You know, I sort of have a lot of insight knowledge, but it was interesting. We had to get an assessment done, and we were told that, hey, it's going to be 18 months before we probably get there, and then. You know, if we have the services in place after that, then we're not 100% sure if we're even going to be able to, you know, implement them. And what was heartbreaking for me and my family is going, well, in 18 months' time, I have no idea how mum's going to be. I have no idea how we need it now. Like, in fact, we
she'll
probably
need a
need it
reassessment
18 months
in 18
ago.
months' time. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels like we're trying to predict the future, right? That about going, well, they might be doing needs analyses now and assessments now, but you almost have to predict that, because it is a progressive disease and it isn't going to get better. And so a lot of the assessments that we're finding and a lot of the medical intervention is based on here and now, not on the predicting the future, which is so frustrating from a family's point of view, but also from a health professional's point of view. I can't even tell you how frustrating it is. So Olivia, for me, right, don't know if you know my backstory too much, but I've had a head injury myself when I was younger. So here I am looking at, genetics. I'm going, Parkinson's is clearly in my family, very close family. I've had a previous head injury. It's a neurological condition. You know, I'm thinking about this stuff as what a lot of people do when they have a family member diagnosed with something. Can you tell me, is there anything that people can do? Asking for a friend.
Look, I can't answer that question because we don't look, there's a genetic predisposition, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get Parkinson's.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's no use finding out whether or not you've got those genes, because it doesn't make a difference. But if I could give general advice, which is absolutely not backed up by science at all, it would be, I don't know, concentrate on nutrition and hydration, exercise, and that's just for anyone in terms of aging and aging well. Like I said before, you know, even if you just do Pilates, for example, or yoga that keeps your core strength up, you know, you've got to reduce falls risk. And you know, we all know in aging, like a fall and a hip break is, you know, pretty has a huge impact on your life and your well-being. So, I mean, it's not rocket science, I'm afraid. I haven't got any, you know, great advice other than nutrition, hydration and exercise.
It's really interesting, though, Olivia, that you say that, because I actually attended a 2-day conference last week for Parkinson's that I was just interested. I want to learn more. You know, I have a thirst for learning so much more in this area. And probably my biggest takeaway, to be honest, there was a lot of people there who had much more clever brains than what I did. Half of it, the statistics were way above my cognition. But what I did take away from that was how simple some of the things can be, not to stop it from happening, because we can't do that. We don't even know if that's possible. But those basics, like you said, around nutrition and diet, looking after good, proper gut health, staying active in the community and doing all of those things may not stop it from happening, but it certainly allows us a great base. It gives us a good, strong base.
Yeah, absolutely. So something like exercise can improve cognition, improve like motor symptoms, improve core strength, reduce falls risks, improve constipation, improve fatigue, improve sleep. So when you think about that list, it's just like, it's a motivator.
And this is the challenge, isn't it, between having a very medical model, not just wanting to be free of disease, but having the wellness model mindset about going, well, how well are we aging? Are we aging well and having longevity, or are we just free of disease? And I think that's a whole nother it's a whole nother conversation that I'm more than happy to have one day. But Olivia, before we finish, and I knew that we would go way over time, but I've taken too much of your time up. What's your hope in the role? And I know you don't love the role of Chief Executive Officer, do you? There's another title that you give yourself. What is that?
National Advocate and Change Maker.
National Advocate, I love that. So being the advocate, National Advocate and Change Maker, what's your hope for Parkinson's in Australia?
Well, our aims are to study different communities with Parkinson's, so CALD communities, Aboriginal communities, LGBTQIA, to see what barriers are for people connecting with support. And even those RRR communities that we were talking about as well, regional, rural and remote, because we know that those barriers exist. We just need to know what they are and how we get people over those hurdles. And the second one is an education campaign for GPs and allied health professionals. There's not enough neurologists and movement disorder specialists. And so, we feel like the GP has a really special role to play in, and allied health professionals in the interdisciplinary support of people living with Parkinson's. So we want to make sure that the education out there is the source of truth for those people wanting to make sure that their patients and clients are living well. And number 3 is a national awareness campaign. So like your friend who went into that restaurant, we want that waiter to already know that Parkinson's presents like that, and someone's not drunk and they're not on drugs, and that if your friend had just said, oh, I have Parkinson's, and the person actually saw through radio or TV or social media how that can present in people, perhaps they would have been a little bit more sympathetic. Perhaps they would have, just taken his complaint seriously as a customer rather than, how he was complaining, how he presented. So, yeah, we want to increase that empathy and the knowledge of those non-motor symptoms that we talked about as well. We want people to understand the complexity of Parkinson's and how, community members, members of care organisations, aged care, homes, people working in those, how they can be more sympathetic and empathetic to helping someone manage to live well with Parkinson's.
Well, Olivia, now that I have met you, I feel very confident that people with Parkinson's in Australia and carers and families are in very good hands. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It has educated me. It's a whole new world. My mum was diagnosed back in 2017, but it's been a whole new world for me. And for people who are listening, you never know what's going to come your way. You never know what's going to impact your life. And educating yourself is the very first place to start. And so, Olivia, thanks so much for the work that you're doing. And I really hope that being able to listen to things like this for listeners is being able to understand that difference of people, understanding that health is such a complex issue, but you can start just by supporting different organisations. And if you see different initiatives that Parkinson's in all the different New South Wales, South Australia, Queensland, all the different initiatives that they run, supporting those initiatives also helps make things like research and implementing some of these national awareness campaigns a reality. So Olivia, thanks so much for joining me here on Distracted, and I hope good luck with having your vision come to life.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And we will link anything that we've spoken to with Olivia today in the show notes. But I do want to just make specific reference to the Parkinson's Australia National Conference. It's being held in 1 year's time, just under, on the 6th to the 8th of April 2025 in Canberra. It is open to all people with Parkinson's, their carers, support partners, families, to go and educate themselves and become knowledged and upskilled in knowing how we can better support and create the movement around ensuring that people with Parkinson's are getting the support that they need. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. Please share it with somebody who you know also might be living with Parkinson's who would find this conversation valuable. But until next time, I'm Angela Lockwood. Thank you so much for joining me here on Distracted.